Okay, sorry, waiting on the technology. Okay, the story starts out the same. You became a Japanese peasant when you were born because your parents were peasants. The script changes at the very next point, though. It was not for certain that you would stay a peasant for your entire life, at least if you were a male. And that's because males might be able to escape peasant status through military service. All right, if you were to prove yourself, hold on just a second, Michael. Yeah, I just kind of guess that that's what it was. Set it for 5 minutes. If you have a phone, leave a phone. Another thing that's different, if you are born a peasant and stay a peasant, you're going to be a peasant for longer because the life expectancy for Japanese peasants was about 50 years. This represents a 43% longer lifespan than a European peasant. What's that? Okay. Now, part of this has to do with your diet. Now, if you're a Japanese peasant, your diet's not fantastic. Right? For those of you that like Japanese food, right, your sushi, your tempura, right, maybe your hibachi, and whatever it is, right, it's not this. The diet of a Japanese peasant consisted of the less enjoyable grains. Right? When we think about Japanese or really just about any East Asian cuisine, the grain that first springs to mind is going to be rice. But if you're a Japanese peasant, rice is probably not on the menu. You're eating things like millet instead. And you're eating other greens. Some of them, you might be thinking like spinach, lettuce. It might be things less enjoyable than that, tougher things that we would think of as weeds. But although your diet may not be that enjoyable, it was actually pretty nutritious. So you might be better nourished not only than European peasants, but better nourished than the rich nobles in the Japanese system. The reason for that was what the nobility had done to their rice. For the nobility, the best kind of rice, the rice that was a status symbol of how wealthy you were, was polished rice. It was really time consuming, right? Because you're not grinding it into flour, right? You're just polishing off all of the fiber coating of the rice so that all that's left is very shiny, right? White rice that cooks up very soft. The problem is this rice that they so much enjoyed eating and showing off, right, that they could afford to have it, was deficient in a particularly important vitamin, thiamine or B1. The result of this was the nobility widely suffered from kake, or what we call berry. I know berry sounds like a breakfast cereal or a new flavor of ice cream at Baskin Robbins, but it's not. It's actually this pretty unpleasant disease. Now, we do have photographs of people who are suffering from it. It can still happen, but those pictures are from cases of extreme human starvation. Right? It's just malnutrition across the board. Berry's part of the mix. Right? What it causes, we've got several kind of clusters of symptoms. Some of them have to do with muscles and tendons. So your muscles are weak. Your muscles are painful. In terms of the tendons, not only do you lose reflex, but if you notice, like just kind of the musculature and everything that kind of keeps your feet, like even if you lay flat, your feet will stick up. And that's because of how the muscles and tendons are working together. In beriberi, that stops happening. So you get what's called foot drop, which you can kind of see in that man there. He's resting on those crutches. I'm sure he's weak in general, but you can kind of see that his feet are kind of tipped to the side. The tendons and the muscles aren't working to hold him up the way they should be. Same thing happens at the wrist joint. Yes. Well, some of it's painful. And I'm sure, if you can't stand on your feet the way you're supposed to, I'm sure that in and of itself is painful, but you might not actually feel it because of numbness of feet. That's not necessarily a good thing. This is kind of what happens to diabetics. Often, you'll see people with really bad, out-of-control diabetes have to have their feet amputated. Part of that's bad circulation, but that bad circulation plays into poor feeling. And so people with diabetes will hurt their feet, not know they hurt their feet, and it will get infected, and they'll have to have their foot amputated. And so the same thing I imagine could happen to somebody with beriberi. You don't feel it, but you injure your feet, and bad things happen from there. You do also get emaciated. Even if you're eating calories, your body can't process them correctly, and so you lose some of that nutritional value that you would otherwise get. These things also play havoc with your higher level functions, thinking. You become confused, your ability to communicate with others through speech. You just kind of slowly fade into somebody who's just bedridden and unable to interact with anyone or anything around them. And this was a widespread enough phenomenon. There are Japanese paintings, showing people, family members in the nobility, crying over loved ones. And this must have been a great mystery to them. They're eating the best food, they think. And yet they are continuing to get these horrible symptoms that eventually will kill you. And that leads us to one of our objectives that we haven't always got to do consistently, and that is connecting the lives of peasants to our own. In this case, we're going to try and do some comparison. So let's briefly recap what we know. I don't want you guys to get lost in the details of the symptoms. We do know that in feudal Japan, the rich nobles, the daimyos, likely had a less nutritious diet than the poor peasants. What we're going to be looking at today and tomorrow is if the same thing is true in the United States. I'm going to do that by answering this question, and it's a long question. It's not terribly difficult or complicated, but it does go on for a bit. In the U.S., who is more likely to suffer disease caused by poor diet? People in homes with high income or people in homes with low income? And for now, I want you to go with the answer off the top of your head. Don't say anything out loud. Just put it in the pear deck. Don't go looking things up. It's not what I'm looking for here. Take about 15 more seconds. There's a few of you still left to respond. If it'll let me lock it. Nope. Okay, you guys were a little more evenly divided than second hour. Second hour, it was a 4-1 margin in favor of the belief that people in low-income homes are more likely to suffer disease caused by poor diet. You guys are more like 2-1. Yeah. We'll revisit that response tomorrow, but that's kind of where you guys are right now. What I want you to do now is look at that list. Yes, it's a long list. I've tried to give you examples because some of us, well, let's face it, almost all of us aren't used to talking about food this way, right? I don't know that anybody goes, Right, hey, honey, while you're at the store, would you please pick me up some minimally processed meat? So take a look at your options. Right, I want you to select using your green dot and blue dot, right, the two foods that you think are the healthiest. Green, blue, one doesn't mean healthiest, and the blue means second healthiest. Just wanted to have different colored dots. I thought it might make it easier for me to keep track of things. And especially as the first time we go through this list, I'm going to give you guys about 3 minutes to make your choices. Make sure you do make choices. Remember, this is the basis of your grade. Pear Deck will let me see. And if you just put your dots in like a corner or something and did nothing with them, that would be no good. Yeah, set it for 5 minutes. Leave your phone if you have a phone, AJ. Yeah, Zabri. No. These, we're all just picking healthy on these. So you just want to pick the two foods you think are the healthiest and identify each of them with one of the dots. Doesn't matter which dot. It's just a fidget. I get it. Okay, guys, about 45 seconds left. Devin, I got you excused from that, so you don't have to check later or remind me. Okay, so looks like your choices. Let's start with the column on the left. So fresh produce, right? So fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. Yes, believe those are healthy. I will tell you as you work through this list, guys, there's debate over some of these things. As to what you're supposed to eat in your diet. Should you eat lean meat? Should you not eat lean meat? Should you eat eggs? Should you not eat eggs? Guys, this is just kind of a list based on like common nutritionist advice. So don't take this as any recommendations on me for what to eat. I'm not sure if an apple a day really does keep the doctor away. But you guys went with fresh produce. That is generally believed to be very healthy stuff. All right, some choices for preserved meats. Okay, those are things like all right, Drew, let me get the door for you. Yeah, go ahead and head straight there. I'll get your pass filled out. Oh, you get okay. Thank you, Drew Geisbert. If there's more than GIE, GIS, should do it. All right. No takers for fresh seafood, but fresh seafood is often suggested as a healthy thing. Fresh dairy, we had some takers for fresh dairy, milk, yogurt, that kind of thing. Some of you picked eggs as healthy foods. Again, there's debate over these. When I was about your age, the kind of advice was don't eat eggs. Eggs are bad for you. They've got a lot of cholesterol. If you're going to eat eggs, buy this stuff called egg beaters, which is just egg whites colored yellow, put in a milk carton. Um, and now it's more, the advice seems to be like eggs are okay. Like maybe don't eat like a dozen of them a day, but pretty healthy food. Going on to the next column, minimally processed meat. I said, that's a weird way to talk about it. That's like just basically meat that has been cut off of an animal and not had much else done to it, right? It's like a whole chicken, right? They've chopped the head off, right? They've taken the feathers away, they've pulled out some of the organs you don't want, right? And then they leave you some of the stuff you do want, as giblets inside, right? Livers, hearts, gizzards, that kind of thing. Some of my favorite parts of the chicken. That's minimally processed. You guys jumped down, skipped. I was informed by second hour, apparently they're Totino's pizza rolls. You guys, it's been a long time since I was young enough to make Totino's pizza rolls a part of my diet, so my apologies for getting the name wrong. And then whole grain foods, pretty popular stuff, right? Bread, whole grain tortillas, that kind of thing. And a few takers for refined grain. Okay. Nobody picked seafood. Why not? I don't know, maybe they all watched Seaspiracy on Netflix, where they're like pretty heavy on like all of the heavy metals that end up in seafood.
But that's only if you're a meat-eating seafood creature.
Yeah.
Sharks and stuff. We don't eat sharks like the sharks.
Right. And well, I mean, salmon kind of count, but the question is whether they get big enough. So, I mean, to live long enough to accumulate all of those things.
And you have to eat a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like, but the only seafood is like shrimp, maybe crab. And I'm like,
no. All right. Oh. Now, let's pick the unhealthy foods. Choose what you think are the two most unhealthy foods in that list. It's the same list, guys, so you don't have to go into it in so much detail. We're going to start with a minute. I'm going to guess that'll probably be enough, especially since 2/3 of you have already responded just while I was talking about it. Oh, we haven't got to that part yet, Brenda. So no worries. Yeah, guys, none of this do you need to write in your notebooks. We'll get to that. For right now, just the pear deck. All right, we'll take 15 seconds of this 30-second timer, and then we will see what you guys had to say. Okay, so highly processed foods were a pretty common choice, maybe the most common choice for unhealthy foods. Yeah, guys, things that have lots of chemicals added to them to make them able to sit on a shelf for a long time without going bad. I mean, Twinkies are kind of like the legendary example of this. They essentially don't ever go bad, which led a few years back. There was a big scare. The company that makes Twinkie went out of business, and people were hoarding Twinkies. I mean, the good news is, like, if we found out tomorrow, like, there isn't going to be any lettuce, Like there's no hoarding lettuce because it's all going to go bad. But Twinkies, like you could go out and buy yourself a lifetime supply, even if you were a young person, and probably still be okay because they're so processed they can't die. Yeah, Lexi.
An example of the Twinkie thing is that in sixth grade, we set out a Twinkie. I think we unwrapped it for the whole year, basically, and it didn't go bad.
Yeah.
It just got kind of hard and stale, but it didn't go bad.
Yeah, and if you leave it in its cellophane, like it's essentially good indefinitely. Okay. All right. Okay, preserved meats. Yeah, sorry guys, these are another one of those that's unhealthy. Not as many of you went with those, but like the bacon, the hot dogs, the pepperoni, all those get like lots of sodium nitrites and things, and those can do bad things. I'm not giving you dietary advice, but those are often considered the unhealthy ways to eat meat. Eggs, some of you went with eggs. Again, that's fine. Like eggs are the often debated, are they healthy, are they unhealthy? Okay. Processed dairy products. Yeah, guys, like canned nacho cheese, I'm sorry. Like Yoo-Hoo, Nesquik, those kind of things. Like there's a whole lot of not dairy stuff in those dairy-sounding products. And that often makes them not so good. Like some of those, like the canned nachos, have got like some weird fats that have been tinkered with by chemists. Right? Again, so the stuff stays good on the shelf for a long time, but tends to do bad stuff in your body. All right, prepared snack foods. Yeah, unfortunately, like your Doritos, taquitos, and again, sorry about the mislabeling of the pizza rolls, but lots of those, again, have things in there that are not so great for you. Now, I left potato chips off because arguably, potato chips are just a potato, sliced very thinly, fried with some seasonings added to it. But Doritos and Pringles and stuff, those have been through some black magic to make them work the way they do. I don't want a libel suit from the people of Doritos and Pringles, so let me be clear, not actual black magic, but like Pringles are kind of like potato starch that's been formed then into a thing that looks like half a duck bill, right? And somehow cooked and put in a tube, right? So I also say, as a kid, I loved to eat Pringles whenever I could get them. It just wasn't very often because they were really expensive in the 80s. I'm guessing they're still expensive now. Okay. All right, and then refined grains, right? You guys know, because I'm sure you've been told over and over again that white bread is the devil, right? It's not the devil. It's a little heavy-handed. But the problem with white bread is that white bread is a lot like the polished grain that those Japanese nobles were eating. It's had all of the nutritious stuff stripped away, and it's just starch. That's it. That's why if you look at a loaf of white bread, like maybe Sierra's thinking, man, Dr. Brown mentioned suing people for libel. I'm not going to sue the Wonder Bread people for libel, but I'm going to sue them for trying to kill me with their white bread. That won't work, Sierra, because if you look on there, the first ingredient you're going to see is going to be enriched bleached flour. So they add the vitamins back in because they took them all away in the first place. All right, you guys did a good job identifying unhealthy foods. Now, if we eat lots of those unhealthy foods, we will have a poor diet. In present times, what disease or diseases are caused by poor diet? Now, you've got lots of options there. You can only select one. Most of them you see are for a single disease, right? But some of them allow you to pick a cluster of some or all of the diseases. So go through, make your choice. I'm going to make this fast because I don't want people overthinking this. I want more of your instinctual reaction. I'll give you 10 more seconds of that 30-second timer. Almost everybody's in. All right. All right. So the most picked answer was B, C, and E, followed by A, B, and C, and lots of you went with diabetes. The correct answer is A through E. Right? It is all of those diseases. Right? Poor diet is associated with cancer. Some of it is some of the chemicals in those processed foods are thought to make things like colon cancer more likely. What's that? Yeah, well, and it's, I mean, the other lots of reasons. I mean, just like some people can smoke and live into their 90s and then just die in their sleep, having never had a cancer diagnosis or gotten COPD. Like, I mean, it can happen. So I don't want you to think that if like somebody in your family like had this kind of cancer, right, that it's their fault because they ate a poor diet. We'll get more to whether poor diet really is people's fault anyway. But some cancers, right? Certainly heart disease. If you're eating some of those messed with fats, especially, that can really ruin your arteries. Some of those like messed with fats, though, we used to think were healthy. My grandmother had like heart attacks at a young age, and so they told her to like eat margarine and cook with vegetable oil and all these things. We all know now that that's wrong. Yeah, Lexi.
On the cancer thing, preservatives.
Yeah, a lot of it's the sodium nitrates and nitrites and things like that. Yep, Alexi, you are dead on. That's the big part of it for cancer. Of course, like the preservatives. Yeah, a lot of that's what gets you sitting in your colon doing bad things. Okay. Heart disease is not just heart attacks. Some of the things that can go along with that are strokes. Right. Those of you that pick diabetes, that is kind of like the big one. It's not just people who eat a lot of sugar. Diabetes and obesity are linked. So if you're the two that picked that as well, I mean, you guys are certainly on the right track. For people with obesity, your body tends to become resistant to insulin, and over time it can stop producing its own insulin, and you start having to get shots. So those two things are linked. Nobody went with cirrhosis of the liver. Does anybody know what cirrhosis of the liver is usually associated with as a cause? No? Okay. So, yes, drinking, alcoholism. Yeah. I mean, you damage your liver, right? It gets scarred. As it gets scarred, it stops being able to do its job, and the liver does all kinds of things and stops working, and then you have a really pretty drawn-out, horrible death. Researchers are now finding that the same kind of bad diets, like diets high in really bad kinds of fat, can like do the same thing. Also, how many of you like to drink pop or soda? Okay. All right. Unless you're drinking diet, and that's its whole other can of worms, right? If you're drinking sugar pop in the United States, most likely it's not sugar, it's high fructose corn syrup. Turns out that also gets processed by your liver, whereas sugar does not. And so people who drink a lot of Coca-Cola end up looking a lot like people who drink a lot of whiskey when their livers get studied. So cirrhosis of the liver is also part of it, which means, again, it's A through E. It's all of them. All right. Let's very quickly go back to what needs to be in your notebooks. All right. Our healthiest foods and most unhealthy foods are listed there. So make sure you get those written down. This list will matter later. I'm not just doing this to turn this into a one-day health class because I forgot my subject. We'll give it another minute or so, and then I will move on to the diseases so we can get all that written down. Try to make it a little bit bigger for you. See in the back. Okay, I'm going to leave the unhealthy foods up there. Okay, but also put up the diseases. So that's what you need to have written for the diseases. Drew, don't go crazy trying to catch up to this stuff. I'll make sure that you're able to get the notes and stuff later. You can always get them from Sierra if Sierra is willing to share, but otherwise I'll provide them to you, okay? Okay, I will put that back up in just a second. We do need to do the exit slip thing. It's going to be the same questions as the do now. Follows our usual pattern. It's worth more points. That's the do now. It's not the right one.